comment last night. We had a beautiful discussion with Dominique Ellis from Philadelphia, and she said, you know, holding someone's work in your hand connects you to them. And I think at this time, it's really interesting to remember that, even though we can't be, you know, in each other's presence, we can hold each other's work and have you near.
Everyone that's coming on now, we're just waiting for the slideshow to end and for the last few attendees to hop on before we get started. Hope you're enjoying the images from the Making Matters exhibition. Typically in the summer, we get to see this work every Friday at the very least when we have our receptions, our visiting instructors after class. We get to enjoy each other's company and the work.
Great.
I'm Brianne Rosner. I'm the Gallery and Craft Fair Director at Peters Valley School of Craft. We are delighted that you could join us today for this really special conversation concurrent with the exhibition Making Matters, Fresh Perspectives in Fine Craft. This annual exhibition is online only this year until October 26th, and it features work by some of the artists who have taught at Peters Valley, who would have taught at Peters Valley had we been able to conduct workshops this summer. So the collection is really diverse in mediums and techniques, exemplifying the wide variety of courses offered. So definitely check it out. Before we begin, this is a webinar format, so all of the attendees do not have controls over their video and audio. That said, we do encourage you to type any comments in the chat, which you can find the chat button at the bottom of your screen. We also love to know where you're all from, so please put in where you're joining us from in the chat. Not only do we like to know, but we also do need this information for our funders, so please help us. And we also have at the bottom there, in addition to the chat, a Q&A. So if time allows at the end, we will be asking your questions, so please type them there so that we can see them. And without further ado, I'd like to hand it over to our Executive Director, Kristen Muller, who will introduce the panelists.
Great. I'm not muted right now. Welcome, everyone. I am so delighted to have so many people join us from near and far, and also for our artists that are joining us for this conversation today. It's a particularly odd moment. We are in the middle of the pandemic and we can't come together in person. And the West Coast is on fire, so it's pretty scary. And to any of you who've been affected by the pandemic or this horrible environmental situation, our hearts go out to you. I'm so glad that we can talk about craft and art and human expression and what connects us today. I want to welcome our artists and introduce you to them. So I'm going to read the bios so that I don't mess it up. Today we welcome Jesse Bert, who's, I guess, originally from Tacoma, Washington, right? And,
no,
no?
I'm originally from Pennsylvania.
Hey,
but
Pennsylvania, okay.
Yeah.
What part of Pennsylvania?
Close to Harrisburg.
Oh, nice. But you are based in Mexico, right? In
Yep.
Guanajuato, Mexico. And he holds a BFA in jewelry and metalsmithing from RIT in New York and an MFA in jewelry and metalsmithing from Eastern Carolina University in North Carolina. Three years spent as an apprentice in a tool and die shop before beginning university gave Jesse a strong interest and appreciation for fine handmade tools, which he now uses to embellish his work with delicate texture and design. Over the past 12 years, Jesse has taught metalsmithing and jewelry techniques to students of all skill levels at his own studio in San Miguel de Allende, as well as annual workshops in other cities around the world. Jesse is an adjunct professor at the Technological Institute of Monterrey in Guadalajara. Some prestigious venues where his work have been shown include Franz Mayer Museum, Mexico City, and the Museum of Art and Design in New York City. Jesse was invited to participate at the Haystack Artist in Residence program in 2014, and as a craftsman in residence at Andreas Wilfer Bass Builders Workshop in Germany in 2019. And Jesse has come to teach for us a few times, and I've gotten to see personally the beautiful tools that he makes with the students. So welcome, Jesse.
Thank you.
Next, we welcome my friend, Laurie Klein. And Laurie, I'm like losing this. Laurie, I've known Laurie for, gosh, maybe 25 years now. Laurie's recognized worldwide for her infrared photography. She began as a biomedical photographer in undergraduate school, where she used infrared film for research and diagnostic purposes. I'm so glad she switched majors. What solidified her love and passion for infrared was when she began photographing with infrared film under the tutelage of Ansel Adams when she was a young woman, and she never looked back. Laurie gained acclaim and recognition as an infrared portrait photographer, photographing the female form in the environment. She has her BFA from RIT and an MFA from OU. Laurie Klein is recognized worldwide for her infrared photography. Her work embodies a soft, passionate style that most often depicts the human experience in nature. She began teaching over 30 years ago, and her work has appeared in hundreds of publications and numerous gallery exhibitions. She is author of 2 infrared photography books, Photographing the Female Form with Digital Infrared and Infrared Photography and Artistic Techniques for Brilliant Images. She also co-authored the Hand Coloring Black and White Photography. Laurie has been coming to Peters Valley for 10 years. I've watched her explore new directions in her work and her mentorship with young women, and has an amazing following of photographers that will go anywhere Laurie will go. So welcome, Laurie. So happy to have you. Next, there's a little delay. Wendy Weiss. Wendy Weiss is from Lincoln, Nebraska. Wendy's an artist, a natural dyer, and a weaver who uses natural dyes that she cultivates and collects locally. She's a recipient of 2 Nebraska Arts Council Artist Fellowships, as well as a Winter Tour Residential Fellowship. Her work is exhibited in solo and group shows in North America, Europe, and Asia. She is senior editor for the Textile Society of America and former board member and professor emerita of textile design at the University of Nebraska, Lincoln. She teaches workshops on creative application of warp, ICAT, and natural dye. She collaborates with Jay Kramer on a range of installation projects using diverse materials. And I think you're also pretty deeply connected to social practice. And Wendy was scheduled to teach this summer and is one of our first virtual workshop instructors. So welcome, Wendy, from Lincoln, Nebraska. Next, we have Steve Cook. And Steve Cook, I met many years ago sitting at the Peters Valley and Sika booth. We've had great conversations over the years. And he's worked with ceramics, bronze, and site installation and film. He earned his BA in sculpture from Penn State and studied at Fu Ren University and National Taiwan University. For years, he lived in Asia, hosted a radio language program, edited academic papers, worked as a stuntman, a shuttle boat operator, and adventure tour operator. Work in the Philippine film industry led him back to the USA and California Institute of Arts for an MFA in film and video with emphasis on experimental documentary installation. Steve's work has won awards at film festivals and was screened in the United States, Canada, Germany, and Italy. Since 1999, he's been devoted primarily to clay, teaching, and aesthetics. And he's a pretty rad dude. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'm going to hand it over to our hosts today, Beth Globber and Bruce Dehnert, who are going to be asking questions. And we thank Brianne and Lakota for putting this together from a technological perspective, and Rachel for putting together the beautiful slideshow. So thank you, everyone. Bruce?
So I'm going to jump in here and just thank you all for joining today. And what a pleasure and kind of a real treat it is to be able to sit together on a Thursday afternoon in September in 2020 and have a really rich kind of conversation about what we do and where we are and how we're thinking this all through. My name is Beth Globber, and I am a studio manager here at Peters Valley. It's been a very different kind of experience for all of us, and I am looking forward to exploring those differences and kind of getting our minds together and maybe hopefully paving a way forward for our thoughts and our actions.
Okay, thanks, Beth. I just want to thank Kristen and Brianne for organizing this. And Brianne, your curatorship of the exhibition this year is really fantastic. I know that you had to move and groove pretty fast because of the situation, and so really kudos to you for that. And to Lakota for her technical help every time, and Rachel, great slideshow, thank you so much. Also to the audience today, I don't know what the numbers are right now, but we have a pretty sizable audience, and that's great for a kind of a, here in New Jersey, it's a rainy, cloudy September afternoon. But thank you for joining us from wherever you are. And then to the panelists, Wendy and Jesse and Laurie and Steve. It's really an honor for me and a great pleasure to be able to have a conversation with you. And finally to Beth, so my fellow moderator, it's really fun to be doing a project with you here. I can't see you, you're across campus right now, but things are great. So thank you, and thanks for involving me in the conversation. So the first question is from me, and we'll start off with Wendy. But all panelists are invited. For those of you in the audience, all the panelists are invited to answer every question, though they're not obligated to do so, and so forth. And we're just going to make our way through a list of questions that we've given some thought to about their thinking about being educators as well as being artists and parents and what have you. So the first question is, if we were flies on the walls of your studios and or your brains, what would we see with respect to how you've been dealing with the pandemic in terms of your studio practice, your thinking, your making, your family life, etc.? What does it look like? And in what ways has this pandemic affected you as an artist or informed you?
All right, well, for me, because my work takes so much time, I felt fortunate that I had already considered what I was going to do on the loom. And so I was ready just to go back into my studio. I had traveled to New Jersey, in fact, to visit my mom at the end of February, and thought about how many times I was in and out of Newark Airport before we knew just how bad the pandemic was. But one of the weavings, or the weaving that I did, happened to be in the show, and it's the one that says liar, 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 liar 4 times. And so I just proceeded with that work, and I designed it so that I would be able to make 4 of them. So there are actually 4 repetitions of the word in one weaving, but then there's 4 weaving. So it's a total of 16 times that I'm weaving liar. And I'm on the 16th one now, which is woven in silk. and naturally died. But I had a hiatus working on these because I had some projects come up. And I feel like the pandemic affected me a little bit less than the George Floyd murder. And I wanted to bring that up because here we had two very grave situations on top of each other. Now we have more. We're layered with all these social, environmental, political issues that need to be dealt with. And so that just influenced my thinking and how I addressed some projects that I had for writing. And then the teaching, I immediately volunteered to do the online workshop because it seemed like a way to reach out back into the craft community.
So,
Excuse me. There was one more thing I want to say. In the slide presentation, there was an error. The work before the lyre weaving was a beautiful blue shawl, but somebody else made that. It wasn't my work. The second piece I have in the show has text that says "Who's free?" So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you. Yeah, Laurie, you want to go next?
yeah. So I basically now go on locations and do workshops all over the world, and everything stopped. And my students are calling me, what are we going to do? What, just totally freaking out and stuff. And so I quickly learned Zoom and started doing workshops. And people were so hungry. It was amazing. It was just really amazing. So I did, for like 8 weeks, I did all the workshops with my students because I figure my feeling is you walk the talk. If I ask my students to do these things, they need to too. But what happened for me is I couldn't make an infrared image because to me, infrared is very personal and it's pretty. If you guys haven't seen it, check out infrared. They're stunning. They're just beautiful. They're ethereal. And the shift inside of me was so deep that I couldn't make pretty. So I had to dive deep. I played with different like lens babies and different, different cameras and lenses that altered reality. And the big thing that I think that came out of it for me as an educator and as just a photographer and artist is that I trusted my process more than I ever have in the past because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was feeling. And, and I also have to, I have to be there for my students. And if they see me figuring out a way, then they're going to feel, more confident that they can too. So the other thing that really has happened is that, when we're busy and when I'm traveling so much, I don't get to do my art every day. So I made a promise with myself that I have to touch my creativity, my art, however that looks, every single day. And I have accountability partners that check in with me, and I've been doing it.
When you were talking about not being able to do an infrared, were you talking about like you felt like it was something that was decadent to be doing something beautiful during the period of time, or am I reading that wrong?
No, I think that's a really good question, Bruce. I think maybe, but I just didn't feel pretty because everything was so confusing. And also it's something that I knew. It was just, infrared was always, yeah, I guess it is decadent. It's gorgeous, and things weren't gorgeous. Things weren't pretty. Things didn't feel good because a lot of my images, they feel good when you look at them. And I wasn't feeling that. So I had to find something else for a voice. And I do a lot of expressive arts. My youngest son is a doctor. So we go in and talk to a lot of people, including doctors, about how expressive arts is healing. So I realized that infrared would not be healing for me right now. So I worked on other things.
Thank you, Laurie. Jesse, would you like to tackle that next?
Oh, sure. I guess I'm very fortunate where I live in Mexico because it's a small walking town where everything I need is kind of accessible, maybe within 2 blocks or something. So I would have to say that fortunately the pandemic didn't really affect initially a lot of my making process, and I was still able to, I mean, I had plenty of work to do, and I did some really great fun jewelry pieces that I might not have taken as much time to work on. And I worked on a couple of commissions, a couple different hammer commissions for people and so on. I guess I would have been traveling a lot more had the pandemic not happened. I travel numerous times each year also to give workshops at different places around the world, and so that didn't happen um, the way it would have normally. But I have been able to do some very small group live workshops, and I did start also, like many people, I've given one Zoom workshop, and foresee that I'll probably do more of those. But that's a little bit about what happened. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Steve, how about, what's your experience been?
Well, I stopped teaching. Can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay. I stopped teaching full-time last year, and we also started homeschooling our 2 boys last year. So the everyday routine maybe hasn't changed so much in the past, 8 months. But I did switch from working with clay to working again in video. And I'm doing a video series with a good friend of mine. We've known each other from back in the 80s, back in Asia. And so we're doing a series sort of based on the Tao Te Ching. It's a Qigong video series breaking down certain movements that we're both familiar with, and exploring the Taoist basis for these internal arts movements. So that's been a big shift, going back to video or film, and then working in a collaboration, a 2-person duet across space, because he's in Germany, and so we share data files and we compile them, and we've made about 20 little short 2 to 5 minute videos, and there are about another 20 to be made in the next few months, breaking these ideas down. And so that was a big shift, but it was a reflection of trying to get back to things that I think are of a deep value to me, and to not be concerned so much with monetizing my artistic efforts. And that's an interesting twist, to put out so many videos that have no chance of any kind of remuneration, and just out of generosity for the content. So that's been fun. Also, we keep honing our family focus to try to uncover the personal value that each of us tries to find in life. So this has given us time to reorganize our living spaces, transportation. We were expecting to travel all year, and that came to a halt. So instead, we focused on getting sort of our domestic aesthetic way. And I think that's been really nice. Teaching for 20 years full time, there were 20 years of deferred life maintenance that the pandemic has let us sort of address, right? So I'd say that's and then I have about 4,000 red bricks that are waiting to find a destination in our backyard. But in order to do that, I have to do some landscaping in the front yard. In order to do that, you got to move all these. It's like Tetris, you have to move all this stuff. So one of my great loves as an artist was landscaping. I considered at one time landscape architecture to be a pretty cool direction to go. So I've always enjoyed labor, and that's going to tie into, I think, some of the other questions I anticipate you're going to have, which is the value of labor. So I've gotten back in touch with physical labor that is not terribly esoteric on the surface, but has maybe profound value.
Great, thanks.
You know, let me jump in here. You know, critically thinking about the changes, we've been faced with rethinking everything we're doing, and we've been put into environments that are not the ones that we're used to. And we're thinking about the future and the effective kind of changes that we're going to be making to create a good, solid future. And I think that, you know, you've touched upon authenticity, Laurie, you know, in your work, and how you had to shift from one thing to another just so that it would feel more authentic in this virtual world, and how we're going forward. I'm just wondering, you know, we're defining our, you know, our deep values. Steve, you mentioned, you know, having to think about your space and rethinking about how you're dealing with your environment. What kinds of things do we need to do to effectively go forward? You know, it's this ambiguous world that we're living in. Could you elaborate a little bit more on these things? Jesse, I'm sure, you know, you've been kind of touched in a different way than the rest of us. Wendy, you've been kind of being able to reach out at times. What kinds of things would be the best gift that you've learned from this time that you would bring forward to the future, so that it would become an effective way to go forward?
Who were you directing that to?
I'm waiting for somebody to light up. Steve, do you want to go?
Well, I'm not sure if this is the kind of response you were looking for, where your question was pointed, but in terms of education, I think artists and educators need to get together more. I think now's a great time to reclaim art, design, craft, skill as core to you know, public education. Since education is being, you know, pushed out of the classroom and being, you know, directed more towards this kind of venue, I think it's a great time for artists to become more involved in the content and the structure of education. Public education is a great idea for building a society. But there's a lot of criticism for the educational system. So I think now's a real creative time for finding solutions. And if there's any chance for me to be a participant in rethinking the structures of education and how education is delivered, and what's the underlying content, what's the big reason for pursuing education. You know, we have big issues with the expense of college education, and where does college education fit into the future? So I think as an artist, I'd like to be a participant in that discussion.
Wendy, I know that we had talked about what's happening in University of Nebraska, and I'm wondering if you could dovetail a little bit about the educational piece for us.
Well, the situation here in Nebraska is we're already going through severe budget cuts. And so the college that was the home of my department, College of Education and Human Science, had to contribute to the budget reduction. And what happened is my department is probably going to be eliminated following hearing. So it's not a done deal, but it seems likely that the Department of Textiles, Merchandising and Fashion Design will be eliminated, which means there's no place in the state of Nebraska for students to go to school if they are interested in textile history, fashion design, textile science. And so in that case, I think that craft schools are going to be hugely important in developing curriculum that can expand the base of what the craft schools are teaching. Like a course in textile history would be pretty fascinating if the place has the resources to demonstrate those textiles. And I think that other panelists have already alluded to the diminished opportunity for studying arts and crafts at the higher education. And so historically, the kind of education you expect from a university and a craft school is quite different. But they could come closer together, and there could be more theory, there could be more exploration of ideas at the craft school than what we might commonly think of.
I think this has to start at younger ages. I mean, we're just pulling all creativity out of schools. And, you know, like I was saying before with the expressive arts, is that it's healing. There are days, I live alone, so my kids are not near me right now. And there are days that I'm good all day. I'm with my students. I'm being helpful. I'm being supportive. And then I crash out because it's like, I don't know how to deal with some of these feelings and these fears. But then I remember, you know, I can help my students do this because, you know, I learned this in, you know, lower grades too, is that I just go out and shoot. I can go out and photograph and I can totally change my whole, I swear if I was hooked up to a machine, I don't know if it's vibrations or my brain waves, everything would change drastically because I'm okay then. I'm just back into my body. So I think I know what you're saying is really important, but it's like a grass level thing. It's like we're all meant to create.
I agree. And I also have been thinking a lot about the burden that the public school teachers have right now reaching those children who have very little access. And why can't members of the community mentor them? Why can't there be a way for just some adult who has an hour to spare during the week to make a connection with a child? But we need to have a structure like Steve was talking about for that to happen. I can't just say, oh yeah, I'd like to help a kid, but so how do we find that kid?
Well, you know, I did in high school, well, when my kids were still in high school, I would do programs because they were starting to cut all the, especially photography out of schools. And I did programs for high school kids. And I went in, I didn't get paid. And I mean, it made such a difference in their lives. And I'm hoping that when schools go back, that more people will go out and do that. Because it's not going to come through education. It's going to have to come from us that have been doing this our lives and know the importance of it.
I just want to jump in here. Jesse mentioned earlier before we started about teaching and about how we're learning how to teach in this virtual world. And he's been very successful and able to be on site with people as well. Maybe you can add a little bit about your experience and your teaching and how you're reaching people.
Sure. Well, I mean, I think there is a real desire. I think people are really hungry for, forgive me, I don't remember who it was, but one of the other panelists mentioned about that right now people are just so hungry to be, maybe it was Laurie, about wanting to continue education. And I mean, I've been really amazed at people's just desire and hunger to continue learning. And one of the things that I think for me is really important is balance. As I've been set in this position with the pandemic, as we all have, and just figuring out what in life is really drawing me in or was important. And one of those things for lots of people is fortunately and very encouragingly is that desire and need to feel that they can continue learning and enjoying things that they love. And so just finding people to work with that are willing to be accommodating and go a direction or be able to work with what we have at hand. I think one of the most important things that we can all look at is being flexible and adapt to what we're faced with so that we can continue to teach and offer people that are hungry for learning that opportunity.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. I was walking down the street yesterday and I was thinking about the adaptability and about how we're all kind of rolling into this thing, and the collaboration that, you know, Steve mentioned about connecting with people across the world, and the kinds of people we're drawing into this discussion today. The flexibility is so important. So these kinds of things, like the partnership that you have, Laurie, about the accountability partner to make sure that you're on task, even though you're there by yourself. Those kinds of tools that we can bring forward, I think are essential to making it happen.
Yeah.
Love that accountability partner idea, except just don't make it be your wife or your spouse. Next question, we're gonna go off topic of, say, educators, and put the artist craftspeople hats on, and you get to be, in this question, I guess I'm looking kind of for a screenwriter role for you to play, and you're going to write your screenplay here, and you're going to look at the arc of your work over for the last period of time, whatever length of time you'd like. It could be 30 years, it could be 10 years, whatever. And I want you to cherry pick some of your ideas and habits, your ways of working, your ways of making, collaborations that you've done, so forth. And how might you think of that as a narrative for this journey that you've been on for this amount of time? What title would you give this last period of time that you've been involved in making artists? And why don't we start with Jesse on that one?
Well, I mean, I'm not exactly sure how to field that question, but my period of making over the last 14 years, just for example, that I've lived in Mexico has, it's been an education for me as a maker, because I have had to learn how to, once again, the word adapt. It was a really different environment. So a lot of the times accessing materials that I want to use to create my work is a challenge, or sourcing is a really interesting approach sometimes, just figuring out where to get the things, or suppliers, that kind of, those are specific things that it's in a way, I guess my creative process involves a fair amount of a quest to find and search out.
I like that, a quest.
Yes.
Yeah. Laurie?
I think I'm letting go of old beliefs, you know, and things like I can't do this or I can't do that, or I've got to do pretty pictures, or I've got to do whatever. And I'm not doing that, and I'm also revisiting old images that I wasn't ready to see. So that's kind of fascinating, because it's almost like, oh my God, did I know this was going to happen years and years and years ago, like decades ago? And now I'm seeing it with fresh eyes. And I feel that it's something that's a part of who I kind of maybe projected that I was. I mean, I played it very safe. You know, I mean, as a wedding photographer, I mean, so photography has always been my therapy, because I didn't get the marriage thing right, got the kid thing right, but I would go to weddings every single weekend. And so it's kind of like fascinating. You look back, and I think that's what I've been able to do, is look back now, because I've got the time. And then I see it's all purposeful. Like I had to do all that to get here. And during COVID, that I can try something. You just can't do what you did before. And also, as educators, how do we help people? How do we give them permission? How do we, you know, so it's a lot sometimes. And I also think allowing more vulnerability into our work is really important. I have a new body of work. that I have a title for that I don't know what it means. And I have not been showing it to anybody because, you know, on Instagram, oh, let's show it, you know, but it has to mold. But I think it's kind of, I don't know that I'm really answering. This is my migration and journey that, and I kind of feel like, again, because I work so closely with this, I just have amazing students. And as Kristen said, my repeat is huge. And so I also, if I want them to do something and to really grow and to also own what they're feeling right now, and that it is totally unknown, I got to do it and just move in that general direction. You don't have to have the outcome.
Yeah. When you were talking about revisiting the images from the past, in terms of revisiting, does that mean that you have been creating new images in response to that, or are you just looking at them, analyzing them, kind of soaking them in?
Really, the latter. I mean, my images that I'm making right now, I don't recognize them. Like, who are you? I'm using toy cameras and stuff, but no, it's looking at images that, you know, I mean, when we were in the dark room, we used to have contact sheets. So latent in our contact sheets were work to happen in the future, but now we're on digital and we just delete. And then when I start seeing the same pattern happen over and over again, because I don't throw anything out, I said, oh, my heart or my brain was trying to tell me something a long time ago and I didn't want to see it. So I'm going back now and then repurposing it. I'm repurposing a lot of images too, as I'm photographing photographs within photographs. So there's and again, Bruce, was like what I said, I have never trusted my process as much as I do right now. And that's weird because I always second guess everything.
Yeah.
Well, no,
the work that we make in the past can be is probably always fairly close to our consciousness. It might not be there quite there all the time, but I think it's probably not too far behind. Yeah.
Right.
Steve, how about you?
Well, I kind of took your question as looking for a through line for you know, the one story that someone might, you know, actually be experiencing throughout their entire life, you know, the one narrative, and that reemerges in different ways, sort of like the four blind people examining the elephant. And yet there's that one single elephant that's being described by these four different perspectives. For me, the elephant would be sort of like that Zen koan, consider a goose in the bottle. How do you get him out without breaking the bottle? There, he's out. You know, for me, that sort of sums it up. That's what I've been working with since birth. That concept, that for me, that story just resonates, and I don't know where to go with that, with the rest of your question, but it's sort of a search for you know, trying to find the empty spaces that are supposed to be empty, but to get to know them, and then to think freely continues. You know, with the pandemic and the staying at home and the change in technologies and so forth. I guess that's where my head is at, is how do we adapt? We have a great opportunity for enormous creativity right now. All the molds and forms have been broken, and it's time to build new prototypes. I probably have left her.
You know, I just want to jump in there. You know, that one heartstring. You know, that hard look at the emotions. You know, the emotional intelligence thing is like, what? This is what's happening to us. We're so faced with it, and we're grappling with it. I wanted to kind of jump down because I'm just looking at the time here, and you know, we talk about elevating our craft and making it accessible, and you know, reaching people in these new and different ways. But it's also like this real self-exploration. What are the joyful aspects of reaching and connecting, and like how do we make that accessible to others, and how do we kind of create a safe place where people can be vulnerable and can be raw and real and authentic. And I kind of think that that's the thing that happens here at the Valley. It's like this safe place. But how do we create that place? And I think this is like a two-pronged thing. We're sitting in each other's homes right now. It's a very personal experience, but it's also a very vulnerable experience because we are also broadcasting, throughout the world. So how do we assure to people that it's okay to explore all of these deep, emotions and kind of craft is a good way to kind of put our voice into it and to then place our voice in other people's homes and in other people's hands, and that we are taken care of by each other in this community. So can you speak to any of the exciting aspects of being a member of the craft community and what it means for you? Which is totally a different question than you've been faced with. Sorry. Wendy, what do you think?
Well, one of the things I did early on in conversation with a friend was we decided we'd contact a few other friends that were all scattered. And then we realized, oh, we could actually meet each other on Zoom, something we could have done last year or the year before, but didn't occur to me until this year. And we've been doing that faithfully every month. And it's really great to have those connections with other artists. And we share the same, as not aesthetic, but we're weavers and we manipulate yarn and color. And our outcomes are quite different, but we've been able to share in each other's lives and what's been happening over this time. So that is on a very personal level. On a global level, I have tuned into various Zoom presentations from different organizations. Like you're talking about, just earlier this week, there was a program from India on sustainable fashion design. And they were talking about incredible projects. I happen to know several of the presenters from various meetings I've attended. So I kind of like having this access from my studio.
What's an example of one of those projects? Can you tell us?
On the Zoom thing?
From the India, the sustainable.
Well, there's a group that I hadn't heard of called Avani, A-V-A-N-I, and she is up in North India in the mountains. And she and her husband have reached out to the communities, which are very rural, to develop economic product development, mostly that have to do with textiles, but I think they've expanded the scope of their work. And I have not looked at the webpage for the organization yet, but they've created incredible employment opportunities that are sustainable, reintroducing indigo dye as a crop, which is an excellent crop. It nitrogenates the soil and makes something that was sort of a colonial invasion at one time, bringing it home to an activity that these farmers can do on a scale that makes a difference in their lives, weaving products and so on.
Yeah, so building back a healthier, stronger kind of experience for the world is kind of at our fingertips as the craft community goes forward. We're talking about building back stronger personally. We're talking about building back stronger, ways to reach people. Let's see, what are you doing to promote that artistic community, or how do you see your role in promoting that artistic community outside of reaching out, personally? Are there any plans or projects any of you might have on the back burner? Steve?
Well, before the COVID fiasco occurred, I've been working for the past few years with some friends in India with Stepwell Project, running tours for high school kids to India. where we spend several weeks looking at arts, crafts, cosmology, the ecosystem, the economic ecosystem. And we see how craft can serve as a cross cast, a transcast kind of outlet, that craft has the ability to cut through class distinctions, class isolation, and craft is a path to certain economic freedom for some people, and it's accessible. And I was interested in continuing these trips, but they've been postponed. Next one might be next fall, next winter, and not high school students anymore. But I think craft needs to come out of the woodwork. You know, we're facing all kinds of class issues in the United States that present themselves as race issues, and the arts and craft have been focusing on this distinction for a long time. I think as artists, the distinction between craft and art was a mistake. You know, both terms mean skill, and art came from the Normans, and the Saxons used craft. So, you know, just the words we're using are based in 1,000 years of politics of marginalized communities. So I don't know where we go with that, but there's definitely a place to go.
I think there can be a really good ways. I think there are good ways being developed that we can share with each other. There was the wonderful gift that was offered from an anonymous donor to all the people that were to teach at Peters Valley this year, and several other craft schools. You know, that's when the whole pandemic happened. I thought, okay, well, that's money, you know, I'm out. I'm not going to be getting that money. But another fellow craftsman, I had seen the organization come up, the Crafting the Future, which is, I saw it on Instagram, but they're supporting people of diverse ethnic backgrounds that might not usually have the chance to be able to explore and experience the possibility to learn through opportunity at a craft school. And one of my friends said that was also supposed to teach this summer, that ended up getting his teaching stipend anyway through this gift, said, you know, he put it out there, you know, look, I'm gonna give part of that money that I didn't think I was gonna get anyway, towards this organization that supports these individuals that might not normally have the opportunity to learn at a craft school. I'm going to give some money to that. And he said, I encourage everybody else to do this too. And so I did. I thought that was really fabulous. And I thought it was a great initiative. So I did the same. I used part of that money that came to me. And that was a little thing that I was really encouraged, and I was grateful to see that, you know, that idea put out there. So anyway.
What's the name of the group?
It's called Crafting the Future, and it's it's for, they support, I'm not sure how the individuals are choosing, but they choose, I think they're usually upper high school level people of different non-Anglo backgrounds that are chosen to be supported, and they help pay to send these people to one of the craft schools. So I think it's wonderful. It's a great initiative.
Well, we have time for one final question. And so the four of you were selected and invited to be part of the panel because a number of reasons, least of not which are the differing ways that you work with material and the materials you choose to work with. And I was wondering if each of you could talk about your approach to your material, how you came, maybe even a little history to that, and so forth, how you came to choose the materials and why you feel as though the materials you're using are most useful to you in terms of approaching your ideas, expressing your ideas, and so forth. And let's start with, Laurie, photographer.
Well, Kristen talked about it a little bit. Mine is infrared. I was an infrared. The first time I did infrared was when I was a biomedical photographer at RIT, and we used it for diagnostic and research purposes. And I'm like, okay, this is kind of interesting. And then I had this really great teacher that said, I was kind of flunking out of the program, and he says, I really think you should go into a BFA program. Why don't you try infrared for nature? And I didn't know that you could do it because it was kind of surreal. And then I studied with Ansel, and that changed everything. But so infrared has always been who I've been, because it has this fantasy part to it, but it also I can have like a cutting edge to it. And so with my hand coloring, infrared works really well. So it's been something, if that's the commonality of all my work. And I know that I talked before that I had to stop doing infrared. That was just, sometimes we need to stop something we know so well and kind of get, turned around, because I was being turned around 360 degrees. And we just finished, as actually our third infrared book. And so it's just now that kind of the juices are running again. But I think, it's my go-to, but you also have to be careful when you have, this is like 40, almost 50 years later kind of thing that I had started infrared. So you can't just, I think this was good to stop it, because now I'm seeing it in a whole different way again. And and I think when you've been in a career and had a passion, photography's been like one of the longest relationships I've had. You wanted to divorce it, especially when infrared was stopping to be made in film, and then you go back to it and it's love and hate, and it just gets better when you keep feeding it. So
interesting.
Yeah,
that's great. Wendy?
Well, I think there's, for me, something magical about constructing with thread. Here you have a fiber that has no shape or form to it and can be bent, but then I can put it on the loom and weave with it, and all of a sudden it's a plane and some kind of material has developed before your eyes. And I love that I can color it and manipulate the structure of it. So it is a fascination with the materiality of thread and the transformation of it into something that I love.
Great, thanks. Jesse, how about you?
Materials, for me, one of the most important characteristics I look for materials that I use are materials that either carry a story with them. I don't use a lot of fine metals or stones in my work unless it's something that already carries a story. Like once I went to the Dominican Republic and I went to a mine where they were mining amber and also larimar. And so those were two particular things where I was able to take the material from its raw source and then carry it with me. And I knew its story, its background, and that had carried an importance for me. So those were materials I chose to use. And then also too, when I construct like the hammers or tools that I make, one of the things, again, is local materials. So I really enjoy being able to go out into the mountains and do things that I love anyway, like go on a great hike and then be able to carefully select a piece of wood that maybe I cut and I won't be able to use it for another year, but it has to cure or whatever. But those are very tactile, sensory type of experiences that carry with them a history. And so that excites me to use those local materials for my product.
Yeah, you really use a lot of different materials. It's kind of interesting here at Peters Valley and other art schools, craft schools, and so forth, even at universities. Some of the departments are named after material. Some of the departments are named after process, which is always a curious thing to me. You know, we here at Peters Valley, we don't have a wool department, but we have a ceramics department. You know, we have a weaving kind of program, and so it's kind of interesting the way that we might process those things, and as artists, the way we might process those things in terms of what we're most interested in using and mastering, and you know, and exploring and so forth. Steve, how about you? Now you deal with a lot of different materials, let's call them.
Yeah, I'm mostly interested in clay and film, moving images, and I think the reason is, you know, at heart, I'm sort of a Zen Tao animist, and these two materials for me become animate. You know, when you work with clay with your hands, it appears to come alive. Just working with figures, you know, it's like, you know, live claymation there in your studio. And if you turn your back on them, it's the same kind of thing with puppets. You know, you never leave the head of the puppet on the puppet while you're gone, because you don't know what it'll get into. So, you know, clay becomes alive the moment you touch it. It just responds, you know, like a living creature. And as an animist, you know, I see that as rational. And with film, the juxtaposition of sound and image brings it alive. And so the fascination working with the editing project, it takes on its own kind of aesthetic presence, but also a sort of cosmological kind of life force is imbued in the material. And it takes on its own character. It becomes a thing, another person in the room. And you can manipulate it like you can other people, maybe. You can sort of push it this way and that, but discovering its own life and the vision it has for itself, to me, that's quite captivating. And these two materials give that to me readily.
It's a great way to end it, because all of the different materials, almost, I think all of us could kind of say that about what happens with material once we start to manipulate it and fabricate and so forth. Yeah. I'll turn over the thing to Beth here, but before I go, thank you, panelists, for joining us, taking the time out of your very busy lives and so forth, and sharing with us your thoughts. So Beth, if you'd like to say the last couple words.
Sure. You know, it struck me that humanity is in this great seventh inning stretch. You know, we've had a chance to really think about things. We've had a chance to grapple. This great awakening about ethics and sustainability is definitely on our plate. And I think that today we've touched upon a couple of key things that people can actually, like these little nuggets of, you know, sustainability in terms of how do we make it through this process and how do we get to the next. And I do feel that we are at the vanguard, and we are an important element in all of, you know, what happens to be humanity. And I'm glad that all of you joined us today and we were able to share our thoughts. Really, really happy. Thank you.
Thank you all. That was great.
Yeah,
thank you
so
very much.
Really great experience. Really wonderful. Lovely.
Everyone.
Oh, thank you for joining us.
Cheers.